Hola. Hello. Buenas noches, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Clemente Soto Vélez Cultural and Educational Center here in the Lower East Side. Bienvenides. I'm Sofia Rizer del Rio, curator and program director. It's a joy to host you in this space. A longtime Puerto Rican and Latinx cultural anchor in the Lower East Side, also known as Loisaida, where artists, activists, and communities have gathered for over 3 decades to create, organize, and imagine otherwise. Tonight's program, Alternate Futures Community-Based Practices in New York, resonates deeply with our mission and with Historias, the multi-year initiative I co-curate with our chief curator, Libertad Guerra. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about it and all our programs and projects and how to get involved. And whether you're in New York or outside of the state, please sign up and be part of our communities. If you're new to the Clemente or part of our longtime community, we're also glad that you are here with us today. To stay connected, sign up to our newsletter or follow us on Instagram. And I've been, and our team, putting some postcards with information for all of you to find out more about what we do. You're also all very warmly invited to Cruces, Thinking in Public Forum, the culminating public program of our first phase of Historias Sembradas, or Sown Histories, Thinking in Public, how we gather and think collectively about the histories of Latinos in New York City. It's happening right here in the entire building, so you get to access the space beyond just the flamboyant on June 14th. And just a quick housekeeping. We're in the middle of a major capital project, so that is why our space is limited at the moment. And it is to make the building fully accessible for everybody and anybody, including a new elevator and expanding our gallery spaces. So thank you for your patience. And the nearest restrooms are on the 3rd floor. We ask that you please exit through the front door and re-enter through the Suffolk Street entrance and head upstairs. I'll make sure that the door is open for you when you come back. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Libertad Guerra to share more about the Clemente, our mission, and our history.
Gracias, Sofía. Hola. Bienvenidos de nuevo. And again, it means a great deal to host this conversation here tonight in a building that has long been shaped by community struggle, creative resistance, and cultural stewardship. As director of this space and as someone grounded in collective place-based practice, I want to begin by acknowledging that this is not just a venue, but an active model of what community-rooted futures can look like. When we talk about alternative futures, like tonight, we're not speaking in hypotheticals. We're referring to the futures that have already been practiced, quietly or boldly, but those who have had to build otherwise. Not out of trend, not out of abstraction, but out of urgency, necessity, and vision. This is the ethos that guides our Historias initiative as well, a multi-year project, as Sofia said, that recenters the civic and cultural impact of Latinx communities across New York City. Through research, public programming, and deep collaboration, Historias is asking whose stories are archived, whose practices are upheld as legitimate knowledge, and how can we build shared infrastructures for the cultural memory and political imagination of communities not only too often made invisible, but intentionally being erased at the moment. So our upcoming Cruces Thinking in Public Forum, Saturday, September 14th, closes out this phase 1 of Sembradas, and it will gather artists, scholars, and neighbors to reflect on just that. It's not a culmination, it is a continuation, a space to think, build, and listen in public. This commitment isn't only programmatic, it is structural. You may have heard about our elevator project that was just mentioned. On the surface, that is about access. But for us, it's also about removing the symbolic and material barriers to belonging in a cultural institution. It's about who gets to enter, stay, and shape a space, not just physically, but politically and creatively. So to our collaborators, MoMA PS1, ICI, so great to partner with you again, our Historias partners, and the many artists, thinkers, and organizers in this room, thank you. You are part of an ecosystem that doesn't wait for permission to imagine otherwise. I also want to recognize dear Cinthya Santos-Briones, one of our commissioned artists at Historias, whose work honors the spiritual and migratory knowledge embedded in everyday life. Her presence on tonight's panel is a reflection of the kind of collaboration that allows this work to grow in integrity and depth. If you're moved by your experience tonight, I really invite you to join us, to keep on joining us. The best opportunity is what I just mentioned at the forum. But sign up to the newsletter and let's keep this conversation going because building alternative futures isn't about tomorrow. It's about the practices that we commit to right now. So with that, I'm honored to pass it to Renaud and introduce tonight's panel. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Sofia and Libertad. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. How's everybody doing? Excuse me. So my name is Renaud Proche. I'm the director of Independent Curators International, or ICI for short. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you all this evening here. It's a great crowd. Thank you for squeezing in. I think every seat is filled. We're thrilled about that. I just wanted to say a few words about what ICI is and how this program came together. We're an organization that supports the work of curators here in New York City, but really supporting their work around the world, and we support curators at all levels of their career. And we do this through professional development programs, through public programs, talks, conferences, talks like this one, and also a program of traveling exhibitions. One of the professional development programs that we run is called the Curatorial Seminar, and we go through a series of professional development sessions with 6 curators based in New York City. Many of them are here tonight, so I'm really thankful to them. And this talk was really coming out of conversations that we were having in preparing the Curatorial Seminar, preparing for the Curatorial Seminar. We realized that what we wanted to focus on was curatorial practice here in New York City that occupied a space outside of institutions, outside of the mainstream museums that take so much space in the cultural landscape, in the cultural conversation, and sometimes eclipse and obscure alternative, creative, curatorial practice that happens in other spaces, in different spaces on the streets, in parks, in public sphere, and in many other independent art spaces. So we really wanted to focus on what those curators were doing and what they do to define what curating is. So we came to speak with Elena about this, who had been part of the curatorial seminar 4 years ago. And I was thrilled that she picked up the conversation and agreed to bring 3 other practitioners together for us to start this very timely conversation about alternative curatorial practice. So I want to really thank Elena Ketelsen González for partnering with us in this program. The project that you've been in charge of at MoMA PS1, the homeroom, has been so amazing in setting new forms and and pushing boundaries and setting new practices. And so I'm thrilled that you've agreed to be in conversation tonight with Azikiwe Mohammed, an artist, teacher, maker, Cinthya Santos-Briones, also an artist, educator, and cultural worker, and then Sienna Fekete, who did take part in the curatorial seminar as well last year. So welcome back to ICI, Sienna. And without further ado, I'm thrilled to ask you all to welcome our 4 panelists this evening.
Scoot on in. Perfect.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Hi, buenas noches. Thank you, Renaud, for that kind and generous introduction. So yes, my name is Elena Ketelsen González. I'm a writer and curator. Oh, I was told not to move this. Okay. Based in Queens, New York, where I currently, yes, Queens, Django, homeroom fellow. There's a couple, Jolene also in the crowd. And I currently work as assistant curator at MoMA PS1. So I'm really happy to be here today to introduce and moderate this conversation, thank you, on the future and past and present and all of that together of community-based practice. Right now is especially a crucial moment for arts and culture, and I want to, again, amplify the words of Libertad and Sofia around El Clemente, which has been a beacon in my practice. See? You think a little bit? Okay, está bien. Okay. And yes, El Clemente has been for so long an example of genuine grassroots art making and exhibition making. And we are in a time where major institutions would rather cancel programs than listen to artists and culture workers. So I think it's time to decenter those places and recur to organizations like El Clemente, like the Lower Eastside Girls Club, like the spaces Cinthya and Azikiwe will speak about today. So thank you all for being here tonight. I know you could be many other places. I'm also grateful to ICI for visioning this conversation and for thinking deeply about what it means to be an independent curator. I remember when I was a part of the cohort, Renaud really pushed me and reminded me as I was building out Homeroom, a program that, because it's in an institution, it can't help but become institutionalized in certain ways, right? And so we're always pushing against what that means. And so to be an independent curator doesn't mean that you can't work with institutions, but it means that you must keep your independence as a thinker and a worker as you lend your labor to an institution. So today our speakers will discuss their community-based practice. I'll moderate a conversation, we'll do some questions. And before we get into that, I do want to demystify what we mean when we say community. I think it's oftentimes a code word that organizations use when they're speaking about the other, right? Those whose racial, class, ethnic markers of identity might be different than what they perceive to be their primary audience. But that's not what we mean today. Our work is not to define the who, but the how. So when we speak of community-engaged practice, to bring bell hooks into the room, we think of community as a verb. It's not a noun. And we're thinking about what does it mean to be in community with one another? What are the commitments that we make and recommit to daily? And what are the relationships that we build, and how do we keep those warm? How do we keep those true? And so I know you will all speak about that today. And I won't present fully on my work today, but I will say that these strategies have looked many ways in my practice over the past few years. Before the pandemic, it looked like hosting exhibitions in my apartment through an independent project called La Salita, where we pulled resources. Someone had art, someone had a hammer, someone had food. Great, now we have an exhibition opening. And oftentimes those openings would turn into perreos, which I like to think of as sites of critical conviviality. And in my work at Homeroom, which Renaud mentioned a little bit about, I've worked with organizations, artists, and activists to amplify their work. And there's many projects, you can look at the website for that at PS1, but some examples are working with the Fund Excluded Workers Coalition to tell the story of their historic $2.1 billion fund to support undocumented workers through and after, and still during the pandemic. And that has evolved into working with organizations like the Street Vendor Project to do things like host their annual gala, hire them as caterers for openings and events, and just generally share the space and resources that we have in a very large building. And I also want to bring into this conversation the words of my friend and collaborator Maya Huracan, who coined the term curatorial comunitaria. She says that it's not about creating publics, but engaging with those that already exist, for example, in the streets. Currently in Homeroom, we have an exhibition in collaboration with visual aids on the harm reduction archives of Heather Berkowitz and Richard Edney. I'm sorry, I mixed it up, of Heather Edney and Richard Berkowitz. And while we look to this past for their lessons, harm reduction meaning safer sex guidelines, also safer injection and drug use guidelines. And so while we look to this past for lessons, we also bring that work into the present by working with on-the-ground organizations like Bronx Mobile, who at our summer warm-up music party series will weave through the crowd, giving Narcan trainings and providing drug testing kits. So not just historicizing, but actually taking those lessons and bringing them into the museum today. So I invite you to come this summer to PS1. Warm-up is a fun time to see the shows and to dance. And now I am very excited to turn it over to our speakers. I'll introduce you each before you go. So I think Sienna, you are first. Sienna Fekete is a curator and educator based in New York City with a background in radio, podcasting, and music. She's currently the senior arts manager at the Lower Eastside Girls Club, very nearby. Additionally, she's the curator of the Community Cookbook Project Volumes 1 to 3 and was the 2021 to 2022 curatorial fellow at the Kitchen. And also a co-founder of Chroma, a cultural agency and creative studio centering on the work and perspectives of women of color. And all of y'all have done so much that I had to squeeze and make shorter your bios. So that's not everything you've done, but I know you'll talk more today. So thank you, Sienna, for being here.
Thank you, Elena. I'm gonna, sorry. Okay, great. That was a wonderful intro. I'm honored to be here with everyone. I'm really excited to be in conversation. But for those who don't know me, I guess I will introduce myself. So hey, I'm Sienna. That's me. Basically, hi. And yeah, Elena did a great job of kind of explaining what I do, some of the projects I've done in the past, who I've worked with, etc. But let's get into it. So what I do, I am a curator, educator, public programmer, and radio and podcast producer. I actually got my start working creatively in the arts through the audio realm, so I think that's just important to bring into the room. Okay, whoop, come on, almost, there we go. Okay, how I got my start. So Elena had mentioned I was a part of a creative studio, more of like an artist collective called Chroma. We were active from 2017 until about 2020. We ended in the pandemic. But it was basically me getting together with my friends, Lada Nawad, who's an amazing producer, and my friend June Canedo de Souza, who is an amazing fine artist now, formerly photographer, but her work is fantastic. So we kind of were just hanging out. I think we were actually at Storm King. The three of us were just like walking around having an art day. And we were like, we need more things that center women of color. Why is there no blueprint for this? Why are there no spaces that are centering this? We were like, okay, maybe it's gonna be a podcast, maybe it's gonna be a meetup, and it ended up kind of being this like movement and mobilized us to curate some conferences. There's more slides on that in the next one, but as a collective, we were kind of really central in our efforts to make space and hear from women of color across creative industries, not just visual arts, but music, fashion, history, archives, etc. And let's see, what have we done? Okay, so some of the projects we've done. Up in the upper right corner, we had a climate crisis incubator held at Culture Hub, which was great. We brought together different thinkers to discuss strategies. These are kind of like flyers and posters from some of the events we had done. Our first ever conference was held at 8 Ball. Hopefully some of you guys know 8 Ball, super OG radical organizing art space. And they let us host our conference in their space, which at the time was underneath a sunglasses shop. So very DIY, get in where you fit in, and invited friends in our community to speak. And then we curated another one, and I just like cold emailed Knockdown Center, and I was like, hey, can we get in here? And they were like, yeah. So we just brought everything in. We had over 30 panelists, over 600 people came, and we were like, wow, we don't need anyone. We just need ourselves. Like, this is great. We can apply for grants. And it felt really special to be working with friends directly in collaboration with our own autonomy, right? So we weren't tied to any institution or funders or whatever. We were kind of just moving freely. We also did something I'm really proud of. We did a podcast series at Art Basel, and it was really great to occupy space during Art Basel Miami in the neighborhood of Little Haiti and getting to work on the ground with a collective called Femme Power. And it was just really great to disrupt the kind of like art fair moneyed landscape that is Basel and bring our own spice and flair. Okay, next, projects. So this is a still from a project that I curated at Entrance Gallery, also on the Lower East Side. And it was all about, it was called Modeling Ecologies, Take Care. It was an exploration of Caribbean architecture. So architectures across Brazil, the DR, St. Thomas, Jamaica, kind of the true expansiveness of the Caribbean. Here's more stills from the opening. It featured the artists, a film by Deborah Anzinger, the duo Ibiani out of Martinique. We had Gladys Gamby, and then the artist Shani Strand and Zenobia, who run Sucking Salt, which is a photo-based archive that exists primarily on Instagram. Check it out, Sucking Salt. So we worked very closely in collaboration to curate this show. We made this show, I think, with $7,000, and just figured it out. And I'm really proud and happy that we did this project. Okay, at Girls Club, teacher hat on. So I manage the arts department, and I have the privilege of working with femmes and gender nonconforming youth in the Girls Club. And we serve 5th through 12th grade, so that's 8, 9-year-olds all the way up until the end of high school. And we offer free programs every day after school, from visual arts to sewing to STEM, you name it. And a project that I really love that was actually in direct collab with Elena as well is we worked with the artist Don Christian Jones, who was the inaugural Adobe artist in residence at MoMA. And through that, we created a class that was art, activism, audio, and we had a cohort of about 10 students, and we created a podcast series that then became a part of the installation at PS1, and it was just really great to have the youth in museum spaces. Most of them are so terrified to be in there. They're like, the security guards are looking at me, I can't touch anything, like, can I be here? So kind of making it a space that they felt safe to be in, to have autonomy over. They wrote like the language, exhibition text, like they are really in that process. And I think that's really important for youth to feel inclusive in that. Let's see, come on. Okay, another thing that that brings me a lot of joy, and that has been a fun deviation from art, but is working curatorially within food. In 2020, I started the Community Cookbook Project, which was kind of like a mobile recipe sharing, skill sharing, email. It was just one large BCC email where I was like, hey, does anyone have recipes that they want to share? And then people started kind of telling the stories and the interiorities, describing their grandmother's home, sharing a playlist. Like, if I'm cooking this food, I got my soca on, I got, and so it really became this way of connecting with folks when we couldn't touch each other, see each other, be in space together. And I was able to do 3 editions, and it's been a project that just is fun and brings me joy. I hope to do a 4th edition soon. If folks have recipes that they want to contribute, I will make myself available. And then last but not least, podcasting. I love podcasting. I used to do a podcast with Cultured Magazine. I basically pitched them, and it was the time where podcasts were like very big and everybody, and I pitched Cultured Magazine. I was like, can we do kind of like an arts podcast? They're like, what's a podcast? I was like, I got it. Like, do you trust me to do this? And they were like, yes. And so just started reaching out to folks in the community, conducting interviews, and yeah, interviewing artists is just such a joy for me. And I think podcasting and radio just is such an intimate space where you can sit down, you're not really worried about how you look or your posturing, and you can just like speak honestly and freely. So that's something that I would like to get back to. I love radio and podcasting. And I think that is everything. Thank you. Okay, we'll go next. Who's next?
Oh, that's you, right? Okay. Thank you so much, Sienna. It's really nice to hear more about your work. We are now going to have Cinthya Santos-Briones, who is an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and cultural worker of Nawa indigenous heritage based in New York. With a background in ethnohistory and anthropology, she spent a decade conducting research at Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, focusing on indigenous migration, Códices, textiles, and traditional medicine. Her multidisciplinary practice combines participatory art and collective storytelling, weaving together nonlinear narratives through photography, archival material, writing, ethnography, drawing, collage, embroidery, and popular education. Un poquito de todo. Her work centers community voices and social engagement. So thank you, Cinthya.
Buenas noches, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation to the Clemente, ICI, and Elena and Zoe for organizing this conversation. My name is Cinthya Santos, and I'm from Mexico, and I have been in this city for around 11 years. And something that brought me to this city was my thesis. I did a thesis about indigenous migration in New York City. So I put a little bit of the things that I do. I just start as an ethnohistorian, and then I moved to anthropology, and my work since 20 years ago centered in migration stories. First as anthropologist, then I was working as a freelance in a journal, in a newspaper in Mexico. So, let me see. Oh, sorry. So, as I say, I start researching about migration, and I was really interested in the indigenous migration, in the Mesoamerican migration, transnational migration to the United States. So, when I was studying, I never thought that like 20 years after I ended up doing art, working with textiles, working with photography, working with the community. But at the end, I was thinking like in the morning, when I was in the bachelor, in the grad school in Mexico, I was always challenging myself and thinking about why the things that we do and research only keep in the small community, in the academic community. So since the beginning, I tried to make work for the community and with the community. So during that time, I did a book about textiles in a community where my family is from. So also, I used to work in ACLA. And as I say, when I came to this city, I was working as a community organizer and at the same time working as a writer in a newspaper in La Jornada about migration stories, the deliveries, but also the cook people in the kitchens that mostly are Mexican or Guatemalans, and the paqueteros, that is the people who travels every week to Mexico, bringing food from Mexico to United States and go back with electronics. So that experience of big writing about migration led me to come back to the school and study photojournalism and documentary photographer. So I started documenting people that was around myself, and I did this project called Las Abuelas. I was living in a church. My partner is a Lutheran minister. So I met these women, and I was also thinking about the representation of the working class, the women in the media, and how media has a huge roles on categorizations and how they portray migrants. So I did this body of work in participation. I asked these women, how do you like to be represented in this portrait? Who you are besides to be a nanny, a domestic worker? And we did this in collaboration, these portraits in their homes. A lot of the portraits that I did were in their bedrooms because it's the only space that they own in New York City. So from that project, I moved to another project during the first Trump administration in 2017 with a lot of families took refuge in churches in different parts of the United States, in New York City, Connecticut, Arizona, Philadelphia, Nuevo Mexico, and I was photographing them. I was photographing faith leaders, activists, and also doing a lot of archive work because my background in ethnohistory, and trying to dig in the history. What was happening during the 80s, during the Reagan administration, and what are the similitudes that Reagan administration and the Trump administration has during that time. So at the same time that I was doing this work, I was working as a volunteer in a legal clinic, and I was really exhausted emotionally, like doing interviews and listen to people's how the people face these struggles. And I take a little bit of time to rethink my practice, something that I knew I want to continue speak about migration. I want to still continue documenting this issue in this city, but in another way. So I ended up doing a project that is called Herbolario Migrante. Let me see. No. First, I did this project that is Spaces of Detention, because these were in the legal clinics. I met a lot of people that were out of the detention center in the in New Jersey. It's 4 jails that is really close. So I did a series of workshops with people who came out of the detention center. They draw and they grow about their experience living in these spaces, and I create a series of collages. And then I start doing this project, like taking a little bit, taking away the photography practice and trying to incorporate other materials like textiles, embroidery, and also a lot of like oral history. I work a lot in the community through workshops, is the way that I collect information, and also we create a place of care or a sanctuary space when we share our stories, but also, you know, we speak about herbs and how herbs have immigrated to this country of this city, as well our memories and the knowledge about herbalism, but at the same time we speak about domestic violence, we speak about the rent crisis, we speak about food, or we speak about the problems that these women have with their husbands. So when I was doing this is part of the photographs that I took during the different workshops that I have been creating since 2019. So the photographs that I did with the cyanotypes and the embroidery, I thought that I need another component. I need to really engage with the community and ask them about their memories, how their grandmother used to heal them, what kind of plants they are connected with. So in the workshop also we create books and also an exhibition, and through the work that I collect during this 4 years, I did a book, a textile book, using the patterns that my grandmothers did in crochet in the domestic spaces. So now when I come back to Mexico, not as an anthropologist, as an artist, and I go to my grandmother's spaces, that is the kitchen most of the time, I see art everywhere. So yeah, this book is also in the form of accordion, in a form of a codex, so it's like 80 pages, and all the texts are written by women. So this project also has been leading me to research more about not just herbalism, but also the knowledge around care. So I have been interviewing like healers, people who sometimes work as a domestic workers or work in construction, and they practice in their homes, or sometimes they have botanicas. The care, they work as a healers, as a curanderos, and it's complicated because in English it's just a word to define the healers, but in Spanish you have like diversity forms to say sobador, brujo, yerbero, many words, so it's more complex, I think, so in Spanish. I don't know how to say all of this categorization, but it's more complex. So this is one of them that she was using the copal and romero to heal, and we took these photos a long time ago. Let me see. And also I have been experimenting, as I say, with textiles and photography still. This is a photo series that I did with flowers that a friend of mine that is an indigenous Totonaco used to heal myself. During the pandemic, I got a problem in my eyes. Chronic disease, so I was trying to see a lot of navigating also in the health system industry that is, as you know, is really complicated, more when you don't speak really well English and you don't understand what the doctor is saying to you and you don't know really well your body. So this is a series that I did using lumen print. That is another like photographic technique with velvet, and I embroidered it. So right now, I am working in a project using an archive that I have when I was working as an anthropologist in Mexico. I was documenting a lot of like agricultural rituals, but also health rituals, where the people go to sometimes close to the river, sometimes in the mountains, and they create altars, and they put food to speak with the spirits. So all of this archive, I was looking over and over this archive, and I have the illusion and the fantasy to come back as a photographer with a medium format camera and retake this photograph, but that didn't happen. So I just saw the photos and rethink, how can I speak about these amazing rituals that practice people who have immigrated to this city that I have been like interview and doing research and interpreted in another way. So I am doing now a series of tapestries where I take like my information, my diario de campo, my notes, my ethnographic notes, my photographs, my drawings, and doing it in tapestry. So and it's my process. I think a lot of my processes start with ethnography and with history, and then from that I move to feel more now, not to be more intellectual, but more to feel, because I understand without having an educational experience in art that emotions, that the experience in art is really important. So something that I have been learning is how to create this experience with the art that I am making in community also. So since 1 year ago, I started working as a cultural worker in the university in CUNY, in the Mexican Studies Institute, and I do a lot of research there, but also we have different initiatives. We have the International Book Fair in Spanish. We have oral history project. Also, we provide scholarships for undocumented students, Mexican and Mexican-American, but also people who are not Mexican, but they are studying the Mexican culture. And also we have a consortium with Columbia University and NYU to provide classes of indigenous languages that are speaking in this city, like Mixteco, Quechua, Nahuatl, and through the university, we ask the programs to value these classes as the students take French or Italian as a second language. So this is the part that my work is currently now, but also I am, as Libertad mentioned, I have been working with the Clemente, doing a project in the border on the issue of migrants' death and the migrants who has been disappearing in the Texas border. And it's a project that is that just started 1 year ago and is going to involve also textiles, a lot of research, a lot of photographs, and I think that next year we are going to have a more sustained body of work of this project. So thank you so much.
Gracias, Cinthya. I'll introduce now Azikiwe Mohammed, who is a crafter who builds physical spaces that include Blackness and the stories of the people of this land. Sometimes that land is physical, and other times it lives in our bodies. These attempts at land shapings have taken place at Canada Gallery, Transformer, the High Line, California African American Museum, John Michael Kohler Arts Center, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and MoMA PS1, among others. He lives in New York and has his studio in Newark as part of Project for Empty Space.
Hi. Hello. Yeah, that was most of it. I've got a lot of pictures. There's not a lot of words up here, so I'm going to be kind of staring and talking through some of the stuff. I came up with the idea for the Black Painters Academy 2017 maybe, but starting things cost $1 trillion and continuing them costs whatever the number is after $1 trillion. So I kind of just left it alone, thinking maybe I'll figure out how to cobble some of this together. I mentioned it to a friend, and I made a set of rules. I like rules, and they all got accomplished very quickly, right? So I was like, well, that sucks. I should have made harder rules. So I felt like there wasn't really a decision for me to make. Like I asked people around me that all said yes, and then I was sort of forced to vote, right? My vote was irrelevant, 9 out of 10. It doesn't matter what my vote is, right? So that's been sort of the impetus of the Black Painters Academy. What are the voices that are around me? What are the things that people need? What are things that I think I can maybe help with? What are things that other people say that they need help with, or more often than not, don't say out loud and you have to try to guess at? So we do a lot of guessing. The Abrams Art Center, somewhere, I think that way, asked if we could make a bunch of canvases for like an outside day. I was like, canvases is not very budget friendly. So they decided on T-shirts. And I was like, well, that is a logistical nightmare, but is something, an object that is useful, something that might be fun. So we just went back and forth, and then we ended up with 300 T-shirts across however many people. The majority of our programming is slated towards an older grouping, 18 and up is what we think as. There aren't a lot of programs for younger people, but they do exist. Once you hit 18, once you hit 19, then all of your interests, all of your hobbies have to become monetized. You have to become a part of the larger failed capitalist experiment. But then where does the stuff you want to do go? Right? Where are the things that you're interested in? Where's the fun that you get to have? Trying to figure out how to then pay for that fun. So one of our many made-up bylines is all of our programming is free because we pay enough already. So everything that we do is free for everybody. Sometimes that's underwritten by somebody like Abrams. Other times it is underwritten by Nada. I just have the pictures that people send me occasionally because I'm doing a lot of the stuff. So for this one, we did a little bait and switch, which I thought was a fun thing. The institutions need CV, right? They need bios. They need these sort of made-up things that many of us here in this room are aware of, might have something sort of towards, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have that, then it's not worthwhile, that you're still not somebody whose work is worthy of being wherever. So I had a bunch of my work up for the first day of NADA, and then I took it all down, and then I put up other community members. That one of the things that we try to do is spread resources around. You don't have a CV, now you do. You have one line on a CV, and you're gonna be at NADA, which isn't a terrible line for you to have. How do you talk to people at fairs? How do you negotiate prices? How many of your friends are allowed to be in the booth at all times? Like all of these sort of things that I had to figure out over X amount of years, I just try to hand over as much as possible. So Dave Sinclair, incredible painter, one of my sisters, godbrothers, aunts, right? Asia. Asia just decided that she wanted to quit her job being crossing guard and start painting. I was like, well, okay, sure. You want to show? Like, let's have a nice time. Paintings are wonderful. And it gave her enough to continue, right? Continuing is the thing that's the hardest for most of us. You need a little bit of a spike, and then you can, that'll, you know, that long slope down. So we try to be around whenever we can add a spike to something. Let's see if we got is that on the table, right? Okay. So this is at Pioneer Works. We did a painting day for the staff. The cultural workers often get left out of the conversation, the people that are responsible for bringing us so much of the stuff, making the stuff. What about them? What about the stuff that you want to make? I'm a current Rockefeller Fellow at the Pioneer Works, working artists. The name is long, but those are all of the words, right? The person on the right, Vivian, is now the head of that program and still talks about this dog painting. So happy. We have one day coming up soon that we're going to be doing for the staff again. Yeah, the pictures are teeny. I'm really sorry. It says, Black Painters Academy with a Creative Time and Rashid Johnson. So Rashid Johnson, one of the many facets of Rashid's work, is making these stages that can exist in memoriam, as sites of performance, as XXXXX, right? So this was, this was the first one out of the extra super spooky time that we all shared together, right? And once we started being a little more in public. So instead of having people paint on the stage and then become this weird, us staring at, right? We get stared at enough as it is. We should be where the regular, all humans are, and the stage should be for staring. But we need something on the stage, so I got the wiggle arm friends to be what would, so then it also opened up the programming to whoever was walking by on the street. If we had extra canvases, if we had extra paint, at any point, they could just sit down and start working. There was no barrier between them having to get on stage and then having to become part of some performance and be agreed to be stared at by whomever. You could just sort of swap in and swap out. And even if you didn't want to participate, from a photographic standpoint, the Wiggle Friends gave us a good amount of things for people to just take pictures of and share with their friends to spread the idea as far as possible, right? Teachers often have a hard time, I'm not going to speak for all of us, figuring out how to balance our own practices versus the classroom. What is that sort of gap in between? I don't believe that gap exists, but that's because I've been blessed enough to be in classrooms where I can just make up whatever I want, right? So mom, 27-year DOE, no thank you for that. So I've been in lots of other less institutions where that flexibility is baked into the ground, right? So we held a workshop at the new museum where we had a bunch of teaching professionals across classrooms, across disciplines, come in and make something, but then also sort of try to figure out that space in between that, again, is fake, is made up, right? Is told by the granting agencies, by our classrooms, to sort of keep us in the classroom and not making stuff outside of the classroom, right? Sort of crunch that space in between both of them. And it's easier to remember something if you're using more of your senses at once. In a more traditional sense, we also do classic curation. There is a gallery that I work with. It's called Gloria's Project Space, currently based on 5 Eldridge Street. They do some programming, I do some stuff. We sort of share resources. We were asked to host something for Upstate Art Weekend. So we have a food bank as part of our programming. You can't think if you can't eat, so we try to feed people. And a lot of the people that work with us work in the arts to some degree. We have, a mother of 2 that had to put her career on hold to help raise her children. We have like younger people in like their early 20s that are just coming to New York, that are trying to find their footing. So I was like, hey, I know we hand out oranges to old people, but are you also interested in like showing the other stuff? Right? So then, sure, any sales they keep 100% of. That's not my money, that's yours. Have fun, make more stuff. That's the whole point. The person on the right, that's Day Sinclair. I try to drag Day around as much as I can whenever possible. Nikki Lesser, my favorite bartender from Toad Hall, Gail LaRocha. Gail's in there, she's got the work on the back over here. People that had to figure out other monetary answers often can't find their way back to making the thing that the money was originally for. I got a little bit of spare time. Let me help you get back to the thing. The reason why it's called Black Painters Academy is because in a lot of black and brown homes, you say that you make art, and the question becomes, who do you paint, right? Because there's still this mythos around portrait painting, like the guy with the hand in the sleeve, like that type of creation of new life, right? Like, look how good you are at making something that represents something that I understand. It must be good. So, if that's where the conversation starts, then that's where it starts. We don't really do too much painting, as you can see, we do some, but start the conversation there and then move to the left and the right and let people sort of follow you, or tell you that you're wrong, and then you follow whoever ends up, everyone's holding the same tail and all kind of spin in a circle. So we held a thinking workshop in Milwaukee with the Ruth Arts or Ruth Foundation. It's not Ruth Arts Foundation. They get a little spicy about that one. So Ruth Arts is the thing that you would look up. Absolutely wonderful. They want to give people time to think. And when we're busy doing the stuff, it's hard to think about the stuff. So we flew a bunch of people out to Milwaukee. That's where they're headquartered. I have a show that's up in their sort of main space, and using the show as sort of teaching tools to help walk through some difficult things. Everybody got Post-it notes, and you could just put Post-it notes onto the paintings, and then people had to talk about the Post-it notes that were on the same one as you. It was a nice little fun game, but it was a fun way for everybody to get to say something without having to take turns. We can all sort of speak at the same time, and then use the objects as these tools to get us between sentences, for sentences to live next to each other, for problems to live next to each other that don't always share the same space or aren't always said at the same time, right? It helps you sort of recategorize what some of these issues are. I have a lot of hearing problems, so I always try to make sure that things are as accessible as possible. So we had walking tour guides, these really wild geodesic domes that they have out there. And then something that one of our friends over here got to come to. Thank you, Wacko, for joining us. We had a large bingo night a week or two ago, where Ruth was able to bring out a wide variety of groups from across the country, some international. A lot of us have to turn our brains off for safety when we end up in spaces with people that don't necessarily agree and things might not turn so wonderful. But when you're in a room full of people that you know are thinking about similar things or thinking in similar spaces, it's a joy to be able to turn your mind off because you're all sharing the same intellectual space. But how often does that get to happen, right? As much as we can, but not all the time. So we were really trying to have a space where people could meet the other people doing the work, shut your mind off for a while, and maybe win some prizes. These were some of our prizes. The ALF one really just had me. I took one of those for myself. So this is our physical space. You can see this like 6-pixeled image. These models that we have, these groups that we share in, trying to pass that to as many people as we can, both locally, internationally, nationally. So we have a lot of colleges and universities that will come and will want to hang out. It's not very pleasant because we don't have a very large space. It gets very close, but we can be there for a few minutes and then we'll go back outside and like keep talking about whatever. But we'll just show them the fridges. We're not a nonprofit. We work on a subscription model. Whatever money we get, whenever the bills are paid, I look at the PayPal, and then that's what we use to pay our bills or not pay the bills sometimes. But trying to make sure that it's something that everybody's able to tag in on. They're like, oh, I wish I could. You can. It's fine. Just like ask a few friends for $20 and then sign a lease you hate. And have some cookies with some people that want to think about stuff that's not always the most fun. So trying to make sure that whatever model gets built, it's a sustainable model, easily passable to anybody that wants to, and is shareable by whomever is interested. It means that there's a ceiling. You know, we can't ever grow too large. It means that we don't have other real employees. Everybody's a volunteer, me included. I don't pay myself because it's not why, right? So I had mentioned before, if you can't think, because you need food to think. If there's no food, so we give out food every 3 weeks. That's about as much money as we have. We run a small food bank. We buy most of our food to ensure the quality is always fine. With a lot of the food banks, you get like a can of beef juices, some other food you've never heard of. So this way we can be culturally responsive. If somebody doesn't like the food that we have, a large amount of our community are older Asian friends, so a lot of it is bok choy. That's one of our largest expenses, but they love it and they can't afford it for themselves. So we make sure that that's something. Each bag of food can do 4 to 5 meals for a family of 4 to 5. So we don't do it every week, but we make sure that it should be able to hold for a good chunk of time, or at least put a decent sized dent in your grocery bill. So we put up our signs. We have physical signs. All of the signs are in Spanish, simplified Mandarin, and English, so that anybody can be able to read whatever the thing is. At this point, they know we're coming, so we don't really have to put the signs up. The signs are mostly to just tell the people on the internet that this is where your money is going, right? But when we find new people, it does work, right? We put up signs in new places. We try to, spread out. And since we're not a nonprofit, since we're very flexible, when there's emergency needs, I remember when a lot of our African siblings came out into Tompkins Square Park, and the institutions that had been sort of providing food around those spaces hadn't really figured out dietary concerns yet. We were able to do so without any board approval because there is no board. William Chan's local organizer is absolutely incredible. was like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And if Will asks, I just say, sure. And he was like, get your cooking stuff ready. So we just went outside, made a bunch of halal food. I asked people on the internet for money. They gave us some cash. And then we just parked outside and we cooked. The first thing that you lose is choice. So we try to make sure that people have a choice. So rice, 3 versions of pasta, like halal-based meats. And then, within, a few days, everybody in the general area had figured it out. And then we can sort of step out and let the big dogs get back to work, right? That's what everybody is able to do. But in that meantime, while they're discussing with their boards, while they're discussing with all of the funders and the different people, that's not our concern, right? So we can sort of not replace, not speak over, but just buy them some time so that they can do the thing that they do best while we can sort of ease that need in the meantime, right? Looking at what the resources are that are available, what needs people have. In the winter, it gets cold, so we just buy a bunch of clothes. And, the people in Tompkins Square Park were getting a decent amount of stuff, but there was a whole lot of people in Harlem that nobody was seeing or was looking at. So let the people in Tompkins do the Tompkins thing, and then we would just, pop up to Harlem and make sure they were taken care of. That was one of the organizers up there. They took over like a old Chinese food restaurant. So we do as much bringing voices into rooms as we can. If there's a room that doesn't exist yet, then we'll try to help people make that room. And then this is where we met. This was at the Bronx Museum. When I do get invited into more sort of traditional facing institutions, which the Bronx Museum is adjacent on, right? They do a lot of community work. They do a lot of sort of thinking around some of these ideas, trying to bring as many voices into the general area as possible. Because with the more voices that exist, then the quieter mine gets, and the more I can vanish, and the people that are already doing the work and that are around can be heard and seen clearer.
Thank you, Azikiwe.
Weird thing to end on. There we go. Okay,
No, that's good.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes, thank you all. I think maybe just a few things that I want to sort of synthesize or thinking about as threads in all of your work is, one, don't wait for institutions, right? Don't wait for organizations. Build it yourselves, whether that be through crowdfunding, pooling resources, figuring out how to take and transform spaces and put them to use creatively. I'm also struck by, especially Sienna and Cinthya, as you talked about your work, you come from what might be termed non-traditional backgrounds, and I think that there's a lot of young curators in this room, and so I just love to encourage people who maybe didn't go to undergrad for art history, or maybe don't have that master's, or didn't get the MFA or whatever, that we are in a moment where those things are less and less important. They're great if you have them, that's great, but they're not. They are no longer necessary, and I think that lived and embodied experience brings so much more to the work than anything else. And also, for all of you, just that the reciprocity that is in this work. How do you build trust? How do you create projects that are ongoing? I love what you said. You don't even have to put up the sign anymore. The sign is not for the people who are benefiting from the work. It's for the people who you might need money from, right? Or you might want to invite into the work who haven't been there previously. And something that I'm thinking about a lot lately is I've often been asked in my work, but aren't there limits to what we can do? Aren't there limits to what art can do? Or, oh, but we don't want this to turn into a community center, right? And I think that more and more those questions are irrelevant. The limits are only there if you put them and abide by them. So I really appreciate how you are all pushing and making this work of community building so much more capacious than I've ever seen it previously. So gratitude, thank you all. And we just have a little bit of time, so maybe I'll just ask one question, which is something that came up when we were meeting previously and speaking with Renaud and Zoe. And in this moment where, again, things are getting canceled, funding is getting taken away, one thing in all of your work is you do work with institutions in ways where you, to sort of use Fred Moten's words, you steal from them, right? In the sense that you're taking these resources and you're using them in service of the work that you really want to do. And you're not allowing the work to get co-opted. I think that's really important as we work with different organizations to resist the co-optation. But what I'm curious about in this moment is, where does this work go? Are we in a moment to continue to lean into the hyper visibility that came after Black Lives Matter, that came after pandemic, when everyone was being very loud with their statements and their Instagram posts. And from that, there was money that came with it, and there was funding. But now we're seeing institutions retract that. We're seeing organizations, for many reasons, operate out of fear. What's that term? It's like something like you're complying before you're even being told that you have to, right? And we're seeing that, and then we're also just seeing funding go away, right? With visual aids, for example, we had a grant from the NEH, and it was taken away. So where do we go? And it's a big question, but I don't want to make it so either or, but do we want this hypervisibility, or is it the time to actually kind of go underground with the work in different ways, to continue doing it, but to maybe use different strategies and to resist some of that visibility? I'm really curious how it's sitting with you now.
We're all like,
No right answers.
Okay. I think there's something to be said about being strategic and wily in the ways that, yes, how do we take what we need from these institutions or what have you, or even Dawn being I got this MoMA money. If I eat, we all eat. How can we plug in our community? But I also see a lot of people being very clear about who they choose to align with. Now we're in a time of censorship, of funding getting cut, and having kind of the talons of the funders dictate how you move. And I think there's such a artist refusal to that, and having that integrity and audacity to be I want to do it on my terms in this way, considering the needs of my community and myself, right? And I think also being in the position of being a teacher, more than anything, I think I'm a mentor. All of my students are young Black and brown girls who are I didn't know I could do this. Seeing you makes me realize just the potentiality of what I can become. And I think for me right now, I'm it's the youth. They are so smart. They know who they are. They have had to be in Google Classrooms, not even around other students in COVID. And how are they? I learn probably more from my students than they do me. And hearing how they're I want to build this thing, so I'm gonna start. And I started a chapter in my school of we wanted to create our own archiving library, and just that tenacity to create on their own terms, and then asking for the support and mentorship. I'm great, let's get blah blah to fund it, and really being in that collective operating system. And then I also think, to the point of the underground spaces, I think a lot of people are being a little more this is a sacred space. We don't want to just let anybody in to then photograph and be extractive and be like, this is for the community. Look at all of the Black and brown and queer people we have, but not actually, be in, I don't know, just community understanding support. And I think, in the post-2020, it's like, it looks good to have this diversity, but like, how are you in actuality supporting? And I think the bigger point is the sustainability. Like everyone's like, oh man, I was working so much in 2020 and 2021, and now I'm like, okay, like crickets, So to that point of like longevity and long-term sustainability is something I am particularly interested in.
I think that visibility doesn't mean that you are making the things in the right way. I work a lot with churches in the church environment, and I feel like even though the church has a really complicated and complex history in humanity, are the people I found the people in churches that are making the work in silence, leading by principles of Teología de la Liberación, Liberation Theology, and the Catholic World Movement. So you don't need to put everything on Instagram, because right now, during the first administration of Trump, the people that were in Sanctuary, they were trying to make their cases really mediatic, but right now visibility doesn't mean anything, put you more in risk. So I work with people that go to the legal clinic in this church in Bay Ridge, and sometimes their cases are denamed, and they say, what should I do? And I say something that I cannot say here because it's recording, but it's like, go away sometimes, because if you are more visible, you take more the risk to be coopted by the eyes of La Migra. So I think that, for example, also in the church that I am working, we have a full pantry. We launched artist residency last year with a friend, Raul Ayala, that is also a muralist and painter, and he's working in the community. And he has a studio there. Is other artists who go often to do community and mutual work. And I feel that you can still doing the things that you want to do without posting in Instagram, without showing others what you are doing. Just do the work, because the objective is to do the work, not to show it. And we are really living in a critical times where the community, mostly undocumented communities, are facing attacks. Is this country that we are living in a dictatorship? No, we were speaking not like in Argentina or in Chile in the 70s and the 60s, but we are living in a really critical times where the people they are living their life. Of course, they have joy, but they are really afraid to don't come back home, and they don't know what to do with their children. They don't know how is this year is going to end up. So I don't know, just rethink our practice and rethink the way that what we want to help others. Also for me, when the people ask me like, oh, can I get involved in the church and help people, is why do you want to do this? For an Instagram post, or because also like now the institutions are really centered in artists working in the community, and it's good, but at the same time, it's because it's a component the institution asks you. It's not because you want to do the work, it's because now it's the way that you can get the grants, and the way that you can get the residencies, or the way that you can show your work in the museums, because you work with the communities. But at the end, the benefit is not for the communities, it's for the artists that apply, the artists that have the privilege to write a proposal, and the artist who has the connection. So it's really complex, but at the end, I think that in these critical times, things like this, conversation like this, are like brotando, like, I don't know how to say, blooming, yeah, in the air, in coffees, in restaurants, in cultural spaces, in schools. So a lot of the resistance is going to grow in this country because it's not a war against immigrants, it's the war that these states is creating against human beings, because they are taking immigrants to El Salvador, but next are going to be Afro-American citizens, Native American citizens, white citizens. So we need to be, together, because this is a war against a lot of people, not just migrants.
Those were the points. The middle is where it all sort of dies, right? So as we're watching who the definition of other is become wider and wider.
Yeah, the aliens.
God, the people that we align ourselves with, we don't need to be more careful. I just think we should cast that net wider but quieter, right? Because then people will get, sorry, all of it's just so like cartoon villain, it feels insane saying it out loud. Like people are getting pulled aside from like posts in their phone at airplanes. Like it doesn't mean vanishing, because the vanishing, the going fully underground, doesn't serve anybody. You learning more from your students as an example, and them being like, I know it's possible, and then watching it be possible because you're doing it, right? Why do they want to come into these spaces? Thinking about us all being at risk and helping walk people through what that risk looks like for those that haven't been at risk for as long, and not necessarily saying no, but finding somebody else that can say yes. Like if you don't have the capacity, most of us are in spaces where we know someone that might. Broadening those networks, finding different ways to say yes, I think is the hardest part of what a lot of this new time is starting to look like. We've already figured out insane ways to do this, and now we have to figure out more crazy ones? Well, yes. But what do those look like? Shaking more hands and being more public is how we meet those people that can say what those other newer yeses look like, and then from that new handshake, deciding if we need to turn off our phones and go somewhere else to finish having that conversation.
Thank you all so much. I think you've all offered really generous, practical, and artistic and creative ways to think how art can not only narrate our lives, but transform material realities. And I think that we need that more and more. So thank you all. And I'd love to have maybe just a couple questions if anyone has anything they very much want to ask. Please feel free.
Do you also, in your practice, like looking back to history, and there's plenty to teach us from other repressive times, fascist times we worked through, other artists who worked under impossible conditions? Also internationally, now ongoing as well.
All right, I'll answer this one first, because for me, it's a no until it becomes a yes, right? So I don't start by looking at things, which might have saved me a lot of headache if I had, right? But I also feel like it might start putting me down a path that maybe not, that might be something that I think is right, but the people that are around me might not need. It might be more information that I get really excited about, And then everybody around me is like I thought green beans were like a slam dunk. Like Green Bean Gate of like 2023, like I still remember like every day. Every single person like handed me back the can of green beans. And then people try to like comfort me. I was like, I don't think this is personal. Would it become as personal? Like you, like you have these ideas. Like I went to a bunch of Chinese food restaurants and I saw green peas. So I thought that, so my attempt at research ended up being one of my like life's largest failures. But then when I'm there, then somebody can say, hey, I think what you meant was, so trying for me personally to jump to the I think what you meant was place, and then go backwards from there. And then I go home, and then I read, and then I look to who's on the left and the right, and where are they telling me to go? And then I end up having that turn into a yes.
Maybe I can say that as a curator and art historian, I definitely look at history, but I'm really not looking at the U.S. And most of the strategies that I've developed have come from looking at very grassroots work in Latin America. I'm from Costa Rica originally. Collaborators there who they're working in places where there was never funding, right? So it always had to be done in different ways. But I think it's interesting, Cinthya, that you brought up Chile. I think a lot about Las Brigadas in Chile, when muralists were creating murals and artwork going against the dictatorship. And I love muralism. I did a project with Leika Nunayowar, who's here, who I know also looks a lot at those histories. And so I would say, yes, certainly, of course, the US has had fascism since its inception, but there's so much to learn from other countries and to look internationally at longer time periods.
I think like in my case right now that I am reading a lot about the border, I have been fascinated by this book that I recommended. The name is Sanctuary Everywhere, and the writer speak about the militarization in the border, not just against the migrants, also how has been affected the Native American communities, that we never thought that the surveillance had been targeting Native Americans because how they look like Mexicans, like Salvadorians, like Central Americans. So for me, as no American citizen, as Mexican, I am always fascinated about the history in this country because it's like slavery, but also, you know, I never understand, it's like really this topic, why this country doesn't have good health that is supposed to be the best country in the world, and you know, my husband just came back from Mexico because he is more cheap to take a flight and go back to Mexico to go and see the dentist with our insurance. So it's like, why, you know? And I am always thinking, if I get older in this country, how I am going to pay my bills for health and education. You know, I did my bachelor in grade school in Mexico free. They pay me. So it's things that I don't understand in this country that I need to read the history of the United States, the Howard Scene, and all of these books to try to understand why I feel that I am in the wrong place, but I love it at the same time. So I think a lot of the response, I feel that are in history, but media takes a huge role to make things more complicated sometimes. More now that the propaganda is around, you know, and we see just one narrative that the migrants are criminals and terrorists, and we need to send them back to their countries or put them in jails.
One thing I'll share is a book that I recently read that was deeply transformative by the author Eve L. Ewing. It's called The Original Sins, The Miseducation of Black and Native Children and the Construction of American Racism. And I think that put in, as a teacher, a lot of historical context in the ways in which Native children and Black children have been absolutely abused by the American education system, and understanding even how certain laws pass. The boarding schools, just like post-slavery ramifications for Black children, like it just really put that historical context in place for me. And Eve is a brilliant, brilliant scholar and writer. Highly recommend this book to everyone who cares about education and youth and learning and deconstructing racism.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, but we will hang out for a little bit so you can ask us personally. And again, thank you to El Clemente. Please come back for all of their incredible programs. As I said, this is like a glimpse into the energy of this building. Actually, to answer your question, yes, I look at the history of El Clemente. I look at the history of El Bohío. I look at the history of ABC No Rio, whose archives are upstairs. The history of El Museo El Barrio. So those are the histories that I'm looking to. So please come to these places and love on them and on each other. And see you soon, I hope.